Hello and welcome back. So glad you could join me for today's video. Today has been DNA day for me, starting with when I was putting together the my newsletter this morning. And I've been talking a lot about Ellen Greenberg lately and the DNA testing of the knife and so forth. And today's been DNA day. We're going to jump into this. I'm not going to bury the lead, but there has been a major arrest over the last couple of days using DNA to probably solve. I mean, obviously he hasn't been convicted yet, but we've got a suspect in three Southern California murders, a 73-year-old man named Warren Luther Alexander. He actually is the suspect in a total of four murders. Three in Southern California, one in North Carolina, and I'd like to kind of dig into these. We're going to watch a press conference, we're going to read a couple of press releases, and we're going to get into the details of our victims. The victims are the ones that we should not be forgetting, obviously, right? It's not a story about this clown who was just arrested. He was extradited from North Carolina and arrested in Southern California. No, the story is this tragic story of his victims. Here is the first victim that we know of, 18-year-old Kimberly Carol Fritz, who died May 29th, 1977. His second victim, Velvet Ann Sanchez, a 31-year-old woman, died September 8th, 1977. Lorraine Ann Rodriguez died 2 days after Christmas, 1977. And then a big gap, which only tells me that there are more women in there. Nona Stanley Cobb, a 29-year-old woman who died in a very similar manner. We're going to get into this guy's modus operandi. She died in 1992. So 15 years between the victims. How many others are victims of this guy? All right, so let's go ahead and dive into a couple things. I want to start out, it's really hard on these because chronologically speaking, the cases are being solved kind of backwards, but I wanted to start by going to this news release from a couple of years ago, because this is when Mr. Warren Luther Alexander got on the radar, okay? The SBI is the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, okay? So this is from March 16th, 2022. The SBI's Cold Case Investigation Unit and the Surry County Sheriff's Office solve a 30-year-old murder. Okay, a joint investigation involving the North Carolina SBI and the Surry County Sheriff's Office has led to the arrest of a Mississippi man for the 1992 murder of a North Carolina woman. On the morning of July 7th, 1992, the body of a woman later identified as Nona Stamey Cobb was found on the northbound side of Interstate 77 in Surry County. At the request of the Surry County, let's look at Nona, by the way. I don't want to forget that. At the request of the Surry County Sheriff's Office, the SBI assisted in the investigation. In April of 2021, special agents from the SBI's Cold Case Investigation Unit and investigators from Surry County Sheriff's Office returned to the physical evidence in the case, which was re-examined to include DNA. I don't know if you guys know this. My buddy Matt, Dr. Gruelle, is back from his sabbatical in Africa. I'm actually going to see him day after tomorrow, and I'm really looking forward to it. But he has taught us so much about DNA on this. He is a professor of genetics and genomics at Penn State Behrend. He is the man when it comes to this stuff. I can't wait to talk to him about this. But you guys know that DNA, under the right circumstances, actually keeps very well. And those circumstances are dry and cool. right? They've been able to map the genome of prehistoric creatures based on DNA that they found, buried in the ground. So the fact that they went back and re-examined their evidence and found DNA, man, this is fantastic. While working with Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick, founder of Identifiers International LLC, agents were able to identify Warren Luther Alexander as a possible suspect in Cobb's murder using DNA. Let me pause here again, guys, and just let's talk about this, because we're going to talk about two different DNA technologies that actually helped find this guy. The first one is what Dr. Fitzpatrick used, which is what we refer to as genetic genealogy, right? Genetic genealogy, what it does is it uses, Matt called them SNPs. My buddy Matt calls them SNPs. I wrote it down here. They're single nucleotide polymorphisms. Basically, as I understand it, if you were to take your entire strand of DNA and unwind it, right? And the vast majority of that helical molecule is the same in all of us. In all humans, we are almost identical, with the exception of a few places within the genome. And so by using SNPs technology, they're able to go in and take a look to see what morphs have happened. What morphs do you have in specific loci or locations along that molecule? And using that, they're able to trace your genetic genealogy. This is the technology that 23andMe and Ancestry and so forth uses. So when they're talking about Dr. Fitzpatrick here, they went through the process of finding this guy through genetic genealogy, which is no small feat. And it led directly to solving 4 murders. Here we go. On Tuesday, March 15th, 2022, Alexander was arrested in Diamond Head, Mississippi. He was charged. He has been charged with murder and has been held at Hannock County Jail awaiting extradition in North Carolina. This is on an ongoing investigation as investigators are looking into whether there are more victims, which I believe that there are. Let's see. Shane asked, any pic of him back in the day? Shane, there are pictures online, but I couldn't verify that it was him back in the day, so I have not included it in my reporting today. When I can verify that it is him in those old pictures, I will re-report. Okay, thank you for that question. Okay, so he's ultimately extradited back to North Carolina, right? And then when he gets checked in to jail there, what happens is he must submit to a DNA test. So they take a buccal swab, they take one of those Q-tip style swabs, they rub it on the inside of his cheeks, and then what they do with that is they develop a profile that is, it's a different type of DNA profile known as short tandem repeats. This is, whereas SNPs or genetic genealogy, you're trying to match one person through many people. With STRs, it's a one-to-one match, right? So they take that buccal swab, they upload it to the CODIS database, and basically at that point it's in the database. So if any other law enforcement agency finds a piece of DNA and uploads that piece of DNA to the CODIS database, it can determine if there's a one-to-one match, which is pretty darn amazing, right? Okay, so he gets arrested, he gets buccal swabbed, he gets DNA tested, and so forth. That brings us to this news release right here, okay? This is from a couple days ago. This is Ventura County, California. This is Santa Barbara area, north of LA, kind of up the coast, still Southern California, up the coast from LA. All right, Ventura, California. Investigators from the Ventura County Cold Case Unit have arrested Warren Luther Alexander of Diamond Head, Mississippi on 3 counts of murder related to a series of strangulation murders that occurred in 1977. The Ventura County District Attorney's Office filed 3 counts of first-degree murder against Alexander. He was extradited to California and arrived on August 6th, 2024 from Surry County, North Carolina, where he is awaiting prosecution for the 1992 cold case murder in that jurisdiction. Again, that is Nona Stamey Cobb, right? Alexander's first appearance in Ventura County Superior Court was this morning, so that would have been the 8th, yesterday, or 2 days ago. 2 days ago. A news conference happened yesterday. Okay. And then the arraignment was continued to August 21st. So we're a couple weeks out. 9 a.m., courtroom 11. He's being held in Ventura County Jail without bail. And then let me just go through this narrative here real quick. In February of 2023, the Ventura County Sheriff's Cold Case Unit began re-examining the 1977 murders of Kimberly Carol Fritz, Velvet Ann Sanchez, and Lorraine Ann Rodriguez. In all 3 cases, an autopsy revealed the cause of death was strangulation. DNA evidence was collected from the crime scenes and the victims, though in 1977, I'm sure they didn't know that they were collecting DNA. This was an investigation between the Ventura County Sheriff's Cold Case Unit, Oxnard Police Department, and Port Hueneme, I have no idea how to say that, Police Department. The Ventura County Sheriff's Cold Case Unit is comprised of blah, 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 blah. Okay, joint news conference, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so we're going to get into that, all right? Let's see, is there one other thing? Give me just a second that I want maybe to show you. No, I'm going to skip this. We are going to go over to, I'm going to bring you over here, okay? We're going to watch this news conference together. I have bumped up the audio, so hopefully you guys can hear me. By the way, I have not said yet today, if you want to get my attention in the live chat, just put a GF in your comment. That helps me to find comments that are directed at me, okay? All right. Let's go ahead and have a listen.
Good morning. My name is Eric Natsarenko, the Ventura County District Attorney. On Tuesday of this week, U.S. Marshals transported Warren Luther Alexander, age 73, of Diamond Head, Mississippi, to Southern California, pursuant to an extradition warrant signed by Governor Roy Cooper of North Carolina. Once in Southern California, Mr. Alexander was arrested, secured, and delivered to the possession of the Ventura County Sheriff. Alexander was in custody in Surry County, North Carolina, at the time of the extradition. He was in custody in North Carolina for the charge of murder when we sought in Ventura County and successfully achieved his extradition to our county to stand trial for 2 murder counts. For the September 8th murder in the city of Oxnard of Velvet Sanchez. For the December 27th, 1977 murder of Lorraine Rodriguez in unincorporated Ventura County. While the extradition warrant was being reviewed and processed, we identified a 3rd victim connected to Warren Luther Alexander, Kimberly Fritz, murdered on May 29th, 1977. These murders may have occurred 47 years ago. But the investigators with the Ventura County DA's office, the investigators with the Ventura County Sheriff's Department Cold Case Unit, and officers and detectives with Port Hueneme and Oxnard never gave up.
Hey, he just taught me how to pronounce it, and so did you, April. Hueneme, which seems like the strangest way to pronounce it, but okay, Hueneme.
They never gave up seeking justice for these 3 victims, their loved ones, and their families. Just because a case has gone cold does not mean it should ever be forgotten. And while we cannot bring back Kimberly, Velvet, and Lorraine, we can make sure that the person accused of these horrific crimes faces in Ventura County the full weight and force of the law. For Warren Luther Alexander, once a fugitive from justice, the day of reckoning in Ventura County has finally arrived.
Good morning.
All right, I'm going to pause there for just a second. I want to make sure you guys can hear me, right? Casey Cox, testing 1, 2, 3. Yes. Okay. I just want to pause there for just a second, because now what's going to happen is in this press conference, they're going to talk a little bit about our victims, which is terrific. But before we get into that, I want to go into maybe a little bit of the background of our suspect here, Mr. Alexander, 73-year-old Warren Luther Alexander. This is just a quick little outline that I put together, okay? But this is I guess historically important, I think. And I'll get into that in just a second. Okay, first off, okay, he is 73 years old. He was born in Oxnard in Ventura County, where the 3 murders took place. He worked as an electrician in the Marine Corps. He later worked as a cab driver, and then he worked as a cross-country truck driver during those same 30 years. Now, this is important to me because if we go back to the history of serial killing in the Golden State, the 1970s, man, that was like the golden era of being a serial killer. And I have like a theory on this that, I mean, I've shared with you guys before, but it's been a long time since we've talked about this. I didn't realize until just a few years ago that the interstate system that we take for granted today, I mean, just this summer, my family and I used the interstate system to go from Western Pennsylvania all the way to the California coast, and then back from the California coast all the way to the New York coast, right? And we just take it for granted. But those didn't really finish their construction until the 1970s. And my theory is, when we look at serial killers like the I-5 strangler, Roger Kibbe, he had the ability for the first time to be able to get in somewhere and get out of somewhere really, really quickly. And so I've always felt that it is the ability to travel in the United States that makes it, that really was the renaissance that caused this kind of serial killing rebirth, I guess. That's kind of terrible to think that way. But the fact that Mr. Alexander was a cross-country truck driver kind of tells me, and he was a cab driver, he knew the area, he could get in and out really quickly, he could get out of there really quickly. And I think that because he was a long-haul truck driver, there are likely victims spread throughout the entire nation. And that reminds me, there was what was the name of the serial killer? There was a serial killer who Samuel Little. That's who it was. Samuel Little. So Samuel Little was a serial killer that was a truck driver, and he focused on sex workers. And the thing that was, I don't want to give him credit that isn't due because he was a monster, right? But the thing that kept him from getting caught, even when he was arrested on other things, is that he would pick up his victims in one jurisdiction and dispose of them in another. And because those jurisdictions were far apart from one another, and the police, law enforcement really didn't have the capability of talking to one another and coordinating with one another at the time, he got away with it for a long time. No telling how many people Samuel Little killed. And so when I think about this guy, when I think about Alexander being a truck driver in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, I think that there are probably bodies strewn all over the place. Hopefully not. Hopefully figuratively. Hopefully they've all been found that are not connected to him yet. And that answers your question, I think, Gina, right? Asking what do you think he was doing during the gap years? No, I think that he was plenty busy during the gap years. There's no way that a man that kills 4 people doesn't kill more than that. I don't think that you could possibly, with that mental illness, go from 1977 to 1992 without doing it. And I don't think that he could probably do it from 1992 on either. I mean, maybe as they age, they can't get away with it. But anyway, Mr. Alexander, he targeted sex workers. This is one of the things that we're going to learn about our victims here. His method, his modus operandi was strangulation, and he often used the victim's underwear to do his deed. All right, I think that's probably enough. So let's go back to the video, and we're going to learn a little bit about some of these victims here.
On December 27th, 1977, shortly after 6 in the morning, deputies from the Ventura County Sheriff's Office were dispatched to a call of a female found on the bridge at Laguna Road in the Oxnard Plains area of unincorporated Ventura County. Deputies arrived and found Lorraine Rodriguez lying against the south shoulder of the bridge. Rodriguez was found with a ligature around her neck. The autopsy determined her death was caused by strangulation. Evidence which would later be used for DNA analysis was collected. Investigators from the Sheriff's Office investigated this case until all leads were exhausted and the case became cold. Lorraine Rodriguez was just 21 years old at the time of her death. She was born in Kansas. Her family moved to Oxnard. She attended the Port Hueneme High School. Lorraine had a son, daughter. Lorraine is survived by her mother, 1 sister, her daughter, and 3 brothers. Lorraine's daughter was just 3 years old at the time of her death. Her family described Lorraine as a loving and devoted mother who loved spending time with her family. Ventura County law enforcement has used advancements in DNA technology to re-examine unsolved cases. Due to significant advancements in science and technology, forensic biological evidence can now be analyzed with greater accuracy, sensitivity, and efficiency. The Ventura County Cold Case Homicide Unit, operated under the Ventura County Sheriff's Office, is a dedicated team of detectives committed to investigating unsolved homicide cases.
Here he's going to tell us a little bit about his team, which it's important, but I think that we can go ahead and skip that. Let me just, we're going to pause that right there. Let's go over here real quick, just to go over Lorraine Rodriguez. Okay, she was born in Kansas. She was only 21 at the time of her death. She had moved to Oxnard. She had attended Port Hueneme High School. At the time of her death, she had a son and a daughter. Her daughter was 3 years old at the time. Lorraine was also a sex worker, as are most of his victims. She was discovered on a bridge on Laguna Road in the Oxnard Plain area. The sheriff's department investigated it because it was an unincorporated area. She was discovered 2 days after Christmas, 1977. She was strangled with her own underwear, and the investigation found that her body was arranged in a particular manner that was kind of set up to embarrass her or degrade her, probably out of the victim's own self-loathing, is my layperson's opinion. But the coroner concluded that there probably was more than one killer. But so far, the only DNA that has linked anybody has been to Alexander. Okay, let's go over to the video again. We'll go to the next one.
Is now from 1977.
On September 8th, 1977, 31-year-old Velvet Sanchez lived at the Via Motel, which is located on the 1700 block of South Oxnard Boulevard. On this day, a witness saw her return to her room in the company of an adult white male with a beard. Later that day, she was found dead in her motel room. Oxnard police responded, and officers found that Sanchez had a ligature tied around her neck. Investigators collected DNA samples from the crime scene, and the autopsy later revealed that she died of strangulation.
I'm sure that they didn't know they were collecting DNA samples. I wonder if police were like, hey, someday this is going to be valuable. Let's go ahead and collect the bloody things or something. I don't know.
Velvet was born in Amarillo, Texas. She had left her job at the Navy Exchange just shortly before the time of her death. She was married at the time but was separated. She had 3 children, only one of which is surviving today. She is also survived by her sister. These murder cases have literally spanned generations, through generations of detectives. Many of the detectives and officers that initially responded to these cases are either long since retired or some have passed on. I'd like to thank the investigators from the District Attorney's Office, detectives and crime lab technicians from the Ventura County.
Let me pause there real quick and we'll go over to learn a little bit about Velvet. So Velvet was 31. She's the oldest of the 4 victims that we know about so far. She worked at the Navy Exchange. She had quit her job. She had recently separated from her husband. She had 3 children. She was living at the Villa Motor Court Motel in Oxnard, where she was working as a sex worker. She was strangled to death with a ligature, and that ligature also was her own underwear. She had been seen in the motel with another man, a guy with a beard, and the coroner again concluded that her body had been arranged in a manner to degrade or put her down, similar to the other victims. And again, it's connected to Alexander through DNA in CODIS. All right, heading back over here. Let's just gonna skip to the next guy real quick. I don't want to like I'm glad that they thank everybody for doing this, but I'm just going to go over it for that for now.
On May 29th, 1977, the Port Hueneme Police Department responded to a call at the Marvin. The Marvin was located on Hueneme Road, a short distance away.
By the way he said the Marvin, it seems like that was a place where crime was occurring pretty frequently, right?
From the Plaza Marina. In room 18, officers located the body of Kimberly Fritz. She was on the floor with a ligature around her neck. An autopsy revealed her death was a result of strangulation. At the scene, DNA evidence was recovered from both the scene and the victim. Folks, Kimberly Fritz was 18 years old at the time of her death. She was born in Michigan. She attended school in Ann Arbor, and she was one of 3 sisters. Today, she is survived by her father and one of her sisters. A lot has changed in Ventura County since the deaths of Kimberly Fritz, Velvet Sanchez, and Lorraine Rodriguez. But what hasn't changed is our commitment to provide justice for the victims and their families. We hope that this arrest is a step towards accountability and a step towards closure for the families.
In 19...
All right, so I'm come back over and let's take a look at Kimberly Carol Fritz. Again, this is Kimberly Fritz's phone. Photo. Only 18 years old. She's the youngest by far out of all of the known victims, the 4 known victims. She grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. She was one of 3 sisters. She was just barely out of school at 18 years old. She was found at the Marvin Motel, strangled again with her own underwear, and her body had been staged the same way as the other 2. So I think that investigators back then probably understood from the very beginning that, hey, these are all related, these cases. Now, what's going to happen next, I think, this is just a guess, is I think that having connected him to 3 murders, I'm hopeful that law enforcement across the Fruited Plains are going, let's go in and find DNA evidence in our evidence rooms, in our evidence vaults. There are warehouses full of this stuff. But it takes a county or a jurisdiction with a commitment to solve these cases, and it takes a lot of money. Takes a lot of resources. And so they go on to say that in Ventura County, they were appropriated about $900,000 for cold cases. And I don't want to bring into the national politics of it, but it was an appropriation from Washington, D.C. to investigate cold cases. And I know that there are law enforcement officials all across the nation that are chomping at the bit to open up cold cases and solve them if they only had the money to do it. And I hope that they will start trying to find that money in the form of grants or something else. What else did I want to... Oh, your comments. Of course. Let's go to your comments real quick. April Gale says, another potential victim is Cassie Miller. Same MO, killed October 1st, 1975 at Surfside Motel in Wainimi. April, I wonder if that is, I wonder if the ligature is underwear again. That's a good question. And thanks for bringing that up. Eden says, I live in Amarillo. So sad. I just passed through Amarillo. Not to get on too much of a tangent here, but I love driving so much more than I love flying commercial. I also love flying, but I can't fly I don't have a plane that fits my entire family. So, nor can I rent one, nor am I qualified on one. So, but I love to drive, and we did Route 66 starting just south of Chicago, made it all the way out to California on Route 66. So we went through Amarillo. It was a good drive. Let's see what other comments you guys might have before we call it a day. Let's see. Michelle says hello. Lauren says, I wonder about his mom. You said mom, but here in the States, it's mom. Was she abusive, unavailable emotionally, or struggling with addiction? Yeah. Amanda, wow, this is terrible. They all have the same cause of death with underwear and posed. There has to be others, should be easy to link to this guy. Yeah, I think it's going to boil down to resources. The very first case that I looked at when I started my YouTube journey with Rick Tracewell, my friend Rick, was, if you guys don't know this, I started out on a channel called Solve Crimes with Rick and Gavin. The very first case that we looked at, Rick and I were like, let's see if we can find a case. Who knows? We had no idea that it would be so easy to find cases, but the very first case we found was Judith Ann Hawkery in Sacramento, California. And she died in 1970, I think, maybe 1971. And it was one of those where it's like, you guys have DNA evidence. This is solvable, right? But over the course of 50 years, things had been lost, things had been misplaced, and it requires a tremendous amount of resources. It just does. So hopefully, I know in Sacramento they've solved a couple of like Nancy Benalik has been solved. That was solved last year, 50 something years old. And it's because people like Mickey Lynx, who is an investigator out there, are just doggedly going after it. And she has the resources to do it. It's pretty amazing. Lauren asking about his mom then continues, might explain why he had such hatred towards these women. Could be. Shane replies, Lauren, it's possible in textbook, but I know a lot of people with those issues that don't kill. In my opinion, it's biological. It's your opinion that it's biological to kill. That's interesting. That's an interesting thought. I've shared with you guys before that there were two experiences in my life that made me come to the conclusion that I was wrong about what makes a person kill. The first was, now I'm just saying like a normal, not mentally ill person, right? One would be circumstance like war, right? I had an experience with a scoutmaster who we finally convinced him to tell us war stories, and I asked him a deeply inappropriate question at the age of like 13 or 14. And he decided not to respond to it, to which I responded, I would never be able to do that. And he looked me straight in the eyes and went, yes, you could. Scared me to death. Like, yeah, you could. I promise you could. There's that. And then the other thing is becoming desensitized to it. Like I've shared with you guys again, I grew up in a farming community, and by the time I was 8 or 9, I felt tremendous guilt over all of the little creatures that I had just killed all willy-nilly with BB guns and pellet guns and 22s and so forth. So I just decided I'm done with killing. And for decades, I would not kill flies or ants or spiders or anything like that. I would catch them and let them go. But when faced with the need to provide for my children, I was able to turn that back off. So yeah, I don't know if it's biological or if there are triggers, but Shane, that's an interesting point of view. Autumn asking, I don't know this, but was his mom a sex worker? Is that possible? I don't know. Tiff saying, and the dad too, absent, distant, violent. It seems to me like you guys kind of agree with me that it is more about nurturing than nature. But Shane, I don't know that I disagree or agree with your position on that. Autumn says she hates driving. Oh man, I love driving. Let's see if there's anything else. April, going back to your lead, Cassie was strangled with her pantyhose. Wow. Okay, see if there's a couple other things here. Miranda appreciates me saying underwear. That's funny. No, the word panties doesn't bother me, but it does seem childish, right? It's like what my toddlers grew into after they were diaper trained. That's what it feels like to me. Let's see. Tiff Knox says they say it's both biology and environment. I do believe there are bad seeds though. Interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm just not sure. Guys, thanks for joining me tonight. I appreciate it. I'm so glad that this Shmulio, Mr. Warren Luther Alexander, if he's guilty of the crimes that they have accused him of, I'm glad that he has been arrested. I hope that he will be tried fairly, and if guilty, be found guilty by a jury of his peers. And if that is the case, may he spend the rest of his days doing nothing but looking at the inside of a jail cell. With that, guys, thank you very much for being here. I bid you adieu. I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you liked what you saw, please consider subscribing. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below.